Hello, everyone. LSCI hosts this topic annually. I can't believe it's been a year since our last presentation, and it's a new decade. A little bit about Lancaster Safety. We're a full-service OSHA compliance firm that has a primary focus on making sure every employee gets home safely from work each day. Our slogan is taking safety beyond the standard. This means that we want to go above OSHA standards and make sure our clients are building a safety culture, being safe because they want to, not because they have to. We want to provide a top-notch service that really makes an impact in people's lives. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm here today with Dean, who's one of our safety and health consultants in the field. Dean, can you tell us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure, Kylie, my pleasure. My pleasure to be with you today. I've been working with Lancaster for about a year and a half now, hard to believe, and it's been a real pleasure. My background is I started out in the construction industry, and as a teenager, not even of legal age, I was hired on to work on a church project as a laborer. And I happened to be there in the building committee. If you ever worked on one of those, usually it's quite large and a variety of characters, usually led by one of the leaders of the church, in this case, the pastor. And they were doing a walk around while excavators and bulldozers were moving dirt. And I was looking at the wrong time at the right place and saw the pastor get run over by a backhoe and killed. And it's not like the movies or TV shows. And if you've ever seen anything like that, it just sears in your mind. And all I remember is about it, not just the incident, but the fact it made me angry because there was no reason for it. It was found out afterwards that the piece of equipment had no backup alarm. The pastor never saw it coming. So from the get-go, I've always been involved with safety in whatever role I've played in the industry. And as a result, this is why I'm here today and why I enjoy working with Lancaster.
Wow, thanks for that. So today we're going to be looking at what changes OSHA's recently made, review the top 10 cited violations, and discuss safe work practices that you can implement at your workplace. We want to break things down for you in simple terms so you leave today with a solid understanding of what to do moving forward. Now, we picked some of the most applicable changes with OSHA, but that doesn't mean everything we discuss will apply to your workplace. So bear with us through the topics that don't apply to you and pay extra attention when they do. We've got some free handouts at the end that you'll want to stay tuned for too. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Dean to review the top 10 list.
Great, Kylie, again, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. So what I want to do is go into review the top 10 most frequently cited standard violations from last year, 2019. Each year, OSHA released the top 10 of their most frequently cited violations during workplace safety inspections. And the reason for this is that this gives you an idea of some common things. Far too many preventable injuries and illnesses occur in the workplace, and there are many things that you can do at your company, your firm, your organization. And there's a few that seem to be common every year. So these common violations make up the top 10. So we'll do it in reverse order, and we'll start with number top 10. I love this dog. He looks so happy, doesn't he? Number 10 on our top 10 list basically is eye and face protection. This is the first time it came in the top 10, believe it or not, 1,411 violations. And the reference you see here has to do with the Code of Federal Regulations standard. 29 CFR is the Department of Labor, which OSHA is housed in. 1926 is the construction standard, 1.102. Now, if you're a factory or a warehouse or don't do construction, you may think it doesn't apply to me. But yes, it does. It's just happened that these happen to work on construction standard, but it also applies, if you will, to general industry as well. So eye and face protection was number 10. Number 9, it seems to be in the top 10 every year, is machine guarding. Machine guarding is so important, making sure we protect workers from points of operation hazards, nip points, pin points, etc. We want to make sure when guards are put in place, they're affixed in a permanent way, and the guard shouldn't create an additional hazard itself. One of the common mistakes people make is they think that if I have an old piece of equipment and OSHA came into being in 1970, I don't have to worry about this. There is no grandfathering. You must make sure you provide a guard for all equipment, no matter what it is. And again, the reference here is 1910, which is the OSHA General Industry Standard, 0.212, over 1,700 violations, number 9. Number 8, fall protection, training requirements. And while the standard cited is construction, you can see some of the pictures here. Fall protection tends to be one of the top 4 incidences that happen year in, year out. In fact, fall protection, falls itself, is the #1 cause of fatalities at work, and it's 11 times more likely at home. So fall protection is so important. The key here is training to make sure people understand that they are at height. The trigger height is 4 feet for industry, 6 foot for construction, 10 foot for scaffolding. Make sure that your employees understand that they're working at heights, and make sure they have training that they understand any fall hazards they may be exposed to. The key with all training is a competent person who is qualified to present the training topic is the one that does this. Again, your training can and will save lives, especially for fall protection. #7 on our list is powered industrial trucks. This is undergoing some revision, trying to split off powered industrial vehicles, powered industrial trucks, etc. And you can see here some of the silly things that people do. Look at the picture on the left. There's no reason why this person should be working way up here, but not being tied off to that bucket or making sure you're fully extended. And obviously the person on the right has no business being underneath this truck doing the work. The key here is that most training requirements that OSHA asks for say they be done at time of initial assignment, anytime there's a change in the work or the workplace, or if the person demonstrates a lack of understanding. The difference here is that powered industrial trucks require training and evaluating the operator's performance conducted at least once every 3 years, and that the person who does this does have knowledge, training, experience to train powered industrial truck operators and evaluate their competence. You want to make sure that operators are trained on each type of equipment. So be it a walkie rider or a pallet jack or an aerial lift, you want to make sure that powered industrial trucks training is documented. #7 on the list, over 2,000 violations, again, general industry. Look at #6, the reference is construction, over 2,300 violations and citations for ladders. You can look at these 3 pictures. And I know we laugh at some of these things, but too often I see this happen, especially with the person on the left putting their ladder up on stuff that has wheels that can move, or thinking additional personnel can stabilize the ladder to do the work. So the key here is take a look when you're working at ladders at work and at home. Make sure you have the load rating. You want the right rating ladder for the right job you're doing. Typically, the ladders we use at home are not designed for the workplace, so make sure you have that. You want to make sure ladders are free of defects, and take a look at these. And this is not just a job for the competent person, but the person utilizing the ladders can also take a look. So this is a way you can empower your employees to have additional sets of eyes to look at things. After all, folks that use the tools are typically the ones that are most often to see any kind of discrepancy or problem. Obviously, you want to face the ladder. You want to climb maintaining 3 points of contact, hand over hand, foot over foot, and keep your body centered. And it goes without saying, to move the ladder to another position, you come down the ladder, reposition it correctly, and then climb back up. Don't simply try to walk the ladder over or jump it. So that was 10 through 6. That's our first 5. Let's take a look at the top 5, shall we? #5, respiratory protection. This again applies primarily in general industry, but we're also seeing this apply, especially with the new Silica standard in construction and general industry, which we'll look at in a little bit. Again, almost 2,500 violations here. The key here is that if you do require respiratory protection, the standard requires the employer to create and maintain a respiratory protection program. The key here is to make sure that you have a medical evaluation, that the employee is fit and able to utilize the respirator. And you want to do this using the respirator you're going to use at the workplace. There are qualitative and quantitative points, and as we'll see later, there are some requirements that are being simplified. This can get quite involved, but again, be deliberate and always ensure you're taking the proper steps to protect your employees and yourself at all times. Again, if there's a question about the air, let a supervisor know. Get the air tested, do some environmental sampling to make sure that you're doing the right thing the right way. #4 on our list is Lockout, Tagout, oftentimes LOTO. And again, the reference is general industry standard. This also does apply to the construction standard, especially with concrete trucks and other pieces of equipment. The point being here is that over 2,600 citations were issued. The standard basically has minimum information on controlling hazardous energy while you're servicing or maintaining machinery or equipment. The key here is that OSHA gives you a lot of latitude. For example, producing a lockout tagout procedure, you develop, document, and follow it that works for you. Unfortunately, this continues to move up the rankings. It's #4 last year. Again, 4 out of 5 lockout, tagout injuries or fatalities came because people didn't apply this or simply tried to work on equipment that wasn't properly locked out and tagged out. Now the top 3. Number 3 last year was scaffolding. And unfortunately, it's the same spots for the top 3 that it was in the last 2 years. So you probably haven't know what's coming. Number 3 has to do with scaffolding. And again, the reference is the construction standard, over 2,800 violations. The key here is you want scaffolding designed by a qualified person. Qualified person should have a variety of training. They may have a degree or certifications, but they don't necessarily have to be a professional engineer. You want to make sure you construct and load scaffold according with design. If you rent it, if you have this at your own facility and utilize it, make sure you understand the capacity. You never want to overload scaffolds. Scaffolds should be able to withstand 4 times any imposed load, and that includes personnel, material, and equipment. And there's additional requirements in here that talk about the planking being fully decked and rather fully decked and planked, as well as the cross bracing, not using those as a means of access. You want to make sure these is used properly. Again, look at the number of citations. Number 2 on our list was failure to communicate the hazards of the work. This is interesting because it's housed in the general industry standard, but if you look in the construction, agriculture, maritime, longshoring standards, you'll find they reference 1910-1200 verbatim. I really appreciate this, that OSHA didn't reinvent the wheel in various standards. They simply took the general industry and said, look, follow this. So again, over 3,600 violations last year. The key here is that employers are required to develop, implement, maintain at each workplace a written hazard communication program that describes at a minimum labels, other forms of warning, safety data sheets, SDS, and we no longer use the MSDS of past years, and make sure that the employees understand the information they need and what kind of training you're going to provide. We really need to get this off the top 10 list because there's just it's too easy for this to happen, and it shouldn't. Number 1, fall protection overall, general requirements. No surprise. Over 6,000 violations. The fall standard helps inform employers and employees where fall protection is required, different kinds of systems and methods for different situations, construction implementation of fall system, and proper supervision of employees. Think about this. 2 of the top 10 deal with fall protection. We should get the message here. We know that, again, fatalities from falls, the #1 cause of workplace deaths in construction, and oftentimes lead all industry. They account for more deaths than any of the remaining top construction hazards, including struck by hazards, electrocutions, and caught in between. The key here is pretty simple. Using fall protection will save lives. No one should work the way these workers are working, as shown in the pictures here, ever. So think about it. Take a look at what you're doing. Is it the best you can do? Is there a better way? Work together with your employees, and we can take fall protection off the #1 position, hopefully off the list completely. Okay, so there's the top 10. What's OSHA been up to? Well, it's interesting. Again, it was signed into law in December of 1970, so they turned 50 this year. It's interesting to see in 2019, there was over 33,000 inspections, and that's more inspections than the previous 3 years. OSHA is divided into a couple of segments, if you will, because the enforcement numbers do not include the 22 state plans. A state plan is one that meets or exceeds the federal OSHA requirements and responsible for private sector as well as state and local government workers. And additionally, there are 6 states that cover, using state plans, state and local government workers, and then the private sector is covered by the federal standard. You can take a look at the news releases to find out the state or states you operate in with your company is whether you fall under federal or state guidelines. Oftentimes, especially in the construction industry, you may do projects in multiple states, and so you may have to adjust how you approach based upon if you're in a federal OSHA state or functioning under a state plan. OSHA's goals continue to remain. It's important. Why do we discuss this topic each year, these goals? It's important to come back and refocus as to why OSHA is increasing inspections and, sadly, issuing increased penalty amounts and fines. So the Principal Deputy Secretary of Labor, Lauren Sweet, made this quote you can read for yourself. The key here is that as a minimum standard that we need to meet, And effective and efficient companies, profitable companies, will exceed these goals every year. What else is new? Well, the civil penalties rose again. In 2016, the Inflation Adjustment Act required the Department of Labor to review and update OSHA fines every year. 1990 through 2015, there was no increase. They were increased by about 80% and tied to the Consumer Price Index. So the key here is that these civil penalties and fines have been adjusted annually. The most recent increase occurred January 10th of this year. So what do? Well, the key is be proactive. Practice what I call MBWA, management by walking around. Take a look, be proactive, work with all employees at all levels, in all departments, and with all work crews. And also, Landcash can help perform mock OSHA inspections. The client portal, there's a lot of good live support as well as videos you can take a look at. So again, be proactive with this, and I think you'll find you won't have to worry when OSHA shows up about the fines. As far as the actual amounts, this table shows that the key is serious. Other than serious and posting requirements can be up to $13,494 per violation. Serious violation is one that where there's a likelihood of serious injury, illness, or death, and there should have been some awareness of it. The other than serious are incidences where someone could be injured, but the likelihood of death or serious injury is minimal. And then posting requirements, be it the OSHA poster by itself or as an all-in-one combined with other federal requirements, as well as posting the Form 300A summary, if you will. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. Failure to abate. You've received a citation and you've been given a certain time frame. Again, $13,494 per day beyond the abatement date. The last category is the one that really makes me angry, and that is willful or repeat violations. Willful means just plain indifference to the law. You just didn't give a darn. It went ahead and get her done, whatever excuse was made. And again, you just plain indifference. Repeat is where you repeat a violation that is substantially the same as a previous citation that occurred 5 years or less. So basically back to 2015. And that is 10 times. You look at the number here, 134,937. In addition, with these fines, you'll find that there are additional penalties. For example, fatalities. There can be additional penalties for the organization or company, as well as the principals, CEOs, etc. of companies. There's also been an increased update in states taking companies to task and charging individuals in fatality situations with criminally negligent homicide. Remember, these are civil penalties, and of course, civil penalties require, as we know, a preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower threshold than a criminal threshold, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. So again, these fines are there. They're there, again, to provide OSHA with a mechanism by which to penalize bad actors, and there's no reason to receive a citation, let alone a fine. Again, be proactive. We can help you again with this, with our mock OSHA inspections, live support, a lot of good information. So again, they increased January 10th of 2020, and they will increase again next year, January of 2021. You can also take a look. OSHA posts workplaces that they inspect right on a website, even after an inspection is closed. So you can take a look and look at not only your facility, you can look at facilities in your area, within your industry. You can also look at competitors. You can look at anybody throughout the country and take a look and see what kinds of things occurred, what happened. And again, this can help you. If you have areas where you're not sure, you have some data showing injury or illness, you're not quite sure what to do with it, use this to your advantage and learn from other people's situations, and that can help you make things better or maybe avoid things completely. So feel free to take a look. www.osha.gov is where you'll find this. Well, we all know that COVID-19, the coronavirus, is here. I'm sure you've been aware of this through the news. It's throughout the world. That's why it's called a pandemic. There are 7 different coronaviruses that scientists know of that can infect humans and make them sick. So this is not new. Some of these were identified many years ago. Some have been identified recently. Human coronavirus typically causes mild to moderate illness in people worldwide. The 2 newer versions, the MERS and SARS, have been known to frequently cause severe illness and also death. We're now dealing with COVID-19, a coronavirus, and it's the disease you can get from that virus. So People say, well, wait a minute, there's nothing in the OSHA standards that address coronavirus. You're correct. But there is something called the General Duties Clause. And the whole purpose here is that this is something that is a catch-all. And the purpose is that OSHA will say, hey, you know what? Under OSHA's General Duty Clause, as an employer, I'm required to keep my employees safe from any work-related safety and health issues, and that includes coronavirus. So applicable standards may include personal protective equipment, bloodborne pathogens, hazard communications, respiratory protection standard, etc. So OSHA is advising employers to provide training to all workers if they have a reasonably anticipated exposure to COVID-19. All right, so again, they can require business to modify facilities, protect employees. I know a lot of us are doing the social distancing, remote working, and following the guidelines at this point in time. So again, OSHA has developed guidelines utilizing information for the Centers for Disease Control as well as National Institutes of Health. You can also take a look at California Division of OSHA, Cal OSHA as it's called, has a nice standard on aerosol transmissible diseases. And it's only mandatory for certain healthcare workers in California, but it may give you additional guidance depending on what you work with. So the key is you do have applicable standards that will apply to this. The General Duties Clause basically says that employers are required to provide a place of work for their employee that is free from anything that could cause or likely cause injury, illness, or death. So it's a General Duties Clause, often called Section 5A1, and it's part of the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. If you want to learn more, you can look at 29 CFR 1903. That's the actual OSHA legislation. So the question often comes, are you at risk? Well, those classified with very high exposure risk include obviously healthcare workers that may work with or perform aerosol generating procedures on known or suspected patients, as well as healthcare or laboratory personnel who collect specimens or handle them from known or suspected patients, and also folks that work in funeral homes and morgues performing autopsies that can also involve this, and bodies who may people who may have had or suspected of having at the time of their passing. So industries classified as high exposure includes jobs with high potential. So again, healthcare delivery, healthcare support, medical transport. So for example, jobs with a high exposure will include first responders, obviously law enforcement, as well as EMS, firefighters, folks that work with ambulances. So it's not just the folks in the hospitals, it's everybody as we call the frontline people. So this is very high exposure. So these are the folks that have a very high risk or high exposure. Jobs with a medium exposure risk are those that require frequent or close contact with the general public. Again, schools, daycare, retail settings, restaurants, etc., or high population density work environments. There's also a low exposure risk. These are persons that may have jobs that require contact with people or suspect anybody that has suspected of being or infected are considered to be low exposure risks. So go ahead and take a look in your organization and see which applies. Maybe all three apply to you. We also know that older adults tend to have more issues. There may be underlying serious medical conditions. So what can we do to prevent exposure? Again, stay home, limit travel to essential. One of the things we've done is we're working with our neighbors and we take turns going to the store. We sort of get a shopping list for several of our neighbors, and we go and get it all at one time. And that also limits exposure. Very important to wash your hands often. It's often said that if you do the happy birthday song or the ABCs twice as you're washing, again, you want to use the proper soap, warm water, etc. Do it frequently. We also want to avoid close contact with others. As we know, the new term, social distancing rule right now is 6 feet. I know that we're gregarious. We like being with our friends and family. But the key is if we do the hard work now, I think we'll find that we'll come through this in a lot better situation. In addition, I can also clean and disinfect frequently, surface and objects that are touched often, and obviously avoid non-essential travel. We cannot presume that even healthy individuals are not a carrier. OSHA calls this universal precautions, and you'll find information on this under the bloodborne pathogens standard requirements in general industry. But the idea that treat everyone as infectious, that kind of thing. It's not personal. It's just to make sure that we do what we need to do now, and this will, as we know, shorten this entire experience. So as a general guidance to prevent exposure, again, we know that the person-to-person spread is thought to occur mainly via respiratory droplets when people cough or sneeze, similar to influenza or just regular flu. All right, these droplets can land in mouths or noses of people nearby. So the Centers for Disease Control says the best way to prevent illness or being exposed, again, worth repeating, take these steps. Avoid close contact with people who are ill. Physical distancing. Cover your cough and sneeze if you do have that. Avoid touching your eyes and nose. Clean and disinfect surfaces frequently that are touched often. Stay home if all possible and clean your hands frequently, at least 20 seconds. So this is what individuals to do, but what can employers do? Here's some 5 quick tips. First of all, you are asked to have an emergency preparedness plan, as well as fire protection and prevention. These are already embedded in the OSHA standards. So what we can do is just simply add an addendum to this to say, you know what, I want to have a pandemic preparedness plan. Let's do our own research. Keep up with coronavirus issues in your area. Check with experts. Look at the Centers for Disease Control and other websites. Let your employees know what you're doing. If you have essential personnel, it's very important they be communicated with that you have this program and trained. And again, Lancaster can help develop this for you. Just let us know. I know it's hard. We are known for our work, but encourage sick employees to stay home. If you have team members or associates that are sick, I understand. They don't want to. They feel that I need to be there to do my part, but it's important. It's worth emphasizing. Again, employees may say, I don't want to use my sick days, or show up at work when they should have stayed at home kind of thing. This is really no time to push it. It really isn't. If folks show up to work sick, please send them home or have them work remotely if possible. Fourth, clean, clean, clean. Disinfect your workplace, especially frequently touched surfaces. Wash your hands. Use hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer with 65% alcohol or greater tends to be very effective. It can also dry out your hands, so people will use hand sanitizer with aloe in it. If you got a cough or sneeze, use your elbow, not your hands, and avoid touching your face and other surfaces. Lastly, avoid employees for traveling. There is a web page for travelers under the Centers for Disease Control. It'll allow you to take a look at the area you're traveling to, recommendations and guidelines. We know that there are centers, especially dense populations, where you have a greater chance of exposure, and there's also rural areas where there's a lot less because there's fewer people. So again, do the smart thing, do your homework. So as an employer, you can help not only protect your firm, your organization, company, but also your employees. You'll see a website at the bottom of this slide you can click on, again, from Lancaster, what employers need to know about COVID-19. Moving on, here are some emphasis programs. OSHA has emphasis programs, often called local or national emphasis, and they focus on inspections at workplaces that have particular issues. These are based upon reported incidences, lost time, etc. So OSHA will continue to focus conducting inspections at workplaces, first on organizations that have machinery or equipment that could cause or capable of causing amputations. This is currently underway. It will ran through March 10th. And the emphasis here is looking at a 90-day period. They'll respond to complaints, referrals, hospitalizations. Again, employers are already responsible for making sure that machines are safeguarded to prevent amputations, other fatal injuries. Again, take a look at the guarding standard to help you with that. There's a variety of ways that you can do this. Another emphasis, and again, on amputations. Take a look at your workplace in particular. Look for nip points, cutting actions, points of operation where a person could get injured or there could be an amputation. If an amputation does occur, it must be reported to OSHA within 24 hours when it happened. The program was set to expire, was supposed to expire last month, but it has been renewed for 5 more years. So they're going to continue this emphasis until December of 2024. So again, this is a point of emphasis. This is a good opportunity for you to refocus. Take a look at your equipment and see where amputations could occur. Something else coming up, there will be some new protocols for respirator fit testing. There's some main changes. There's less test exercises. There's shortened, streamlined sampling, and this applies to certain types of respirators. They've been in place for quite a while, but again, these 2 modifications will be done. So again, less extensive exercises, shortened exercises, and they will apply to only certain types of respirators. So check out those changes and see if that applies to you if you use respirators at your place of work. Something else new is OSHA now has a rule requires all covered establishments that have 20 to 249 employees or establishments with more than 250 employees to submit their OSHA 300A summary form to its electronic injury tracking application through OSHA.gov. This is the summary that typically we post every year between February 1st and April 30th. It has to stay up for 90 days so people can see it, but asking this be submitted for all establishments, and this should have already been done. So again, the Form 300A looks like this. Just simply you take your 2019 information off of your running total, and you fill this out and then certify it, and with the establishment information, and basically you're certifying this information is correct to the best of your ability. So again, you can use CSV files, you can do it electronically via an API. There's a variety of ways you can do this. Still, we want to make sure this log needs to be displayed in your workplace through April 30th. This is true of every year. So here we are in 2020. We'll again track work-related injuries, illnesses, hopefully no fatalities. And then next February 1st of 2021, we'll post the 2020 summary, and on we go. Something else new coming up, OSHA is looking at a rule that crane operators obtain certain certifications. This took effect basically in February of this year. And the key is that operators must have a certification or license from an accredited third-party testing organization or an employer audited program, military if applicable, or something that complies with qualifying state or local licensing requirements. This originally started in 2012 with some major changes in the crane operator requirements, especially in reference to subpart CC of the construction standard, which separated out cranes and derricks for construction. So take a look there. It's nothing really new. Just make sure if you have crane operators that they are good to go. There's some current national emphasis programs coming up, and I'm going to call NEPs. These are temporary programs. And again, OSHA uses their effort to focus efforts on particular hazards or high hazard industries. What these programs do is they provide OSHA a real focused and attentive look to assess hazards and dangers that employees may be exposed to. So these are evaluated by using inspection data, injury and illness reports, as well as reports from OSHA's sister agency, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. Just to name a few, there's others as well. Keep in mind that local emphasis programs are also in place. Remember, fall protection is a local emphasis program in all 8 regions of OSHA. Take a look and see, based upon where you're at in the country, what region you fall under. So again, you can take a look here. The list: combustible dust, hexavalent chromium or hexchrome, process safety management, trenching and excavation. So these are the kind of things you can get, and again, you can get it from the OSHA. We'll give you the details on these specific programs. The watch list. This is interesting, is that the bill was introduced in the House of Representatives in November of 2018 to start considering implementing workplace violence prevention standard for certain industries, looking at healthcare and social workers, again, workplace violence, all kinds of physical attacks, assault, battery. Through 2019, there's been growing support of enacting a bill. At this point, nothing has been finalized yet. What's interesting is even though there's no specific workplace violence regulation, again, the related incidents will still fall under the general duties clause. So the key here is, while we keep employees safe at work, is mostly the responsibility of the employer. OSHA does not have any specific regulations yet. Department of Labor is working on this as a top initiative. As soon as something's finalized, we'll be happy to let you know. And again, here's the information. So the general duties clause is the key for workplace violence. Now, this may be employees against each other. Oftentimes it may be a significant other coming into the workplace because of a personal issue and doing these kinds of things, or a variety of rationale. The point being is that, or irrational, if you will, but workplace violence, at this point, falls under the general duties clause. And again, it's shown here for you. Another thing to keep watch on is the Silica standard for general industry. There are plans to release a proposed rule on occupational exposure to allow employers and general industry to meet the same standards as construction. According to a recently published agenda in June, it plans to release proposed rule for this. They can comment on that. And the comment period, as far as information, ended last October. This is typically a way that OSHA takes a look at current situations, gathers information, allows comment, so that they can adjust and make sure the standard provides enough protection but is not overbearing. So stay tuned for that in June to take a look at any proposed rulemaking for occupational exposure to crystal and silica general industry. Another thing to keep a look at is a proposed revision for walking and working surfaces. And this is scheduled for this month, April of 2020. Clarify requirements for stair rail systems. I'm trying to clarify this because a lot of feedback I received from employers that the current requirement standards were unclear as far as handrails and stair rails, walking and working surfaces, dimensioning, etc. So stay tuned for this month, April 2020, for additional clarifications. When OSHA starts these processes for rulemaking, proposed rulemaking, rescission, amendment, or new rules, and oftentimes we'll put things out for public comment. And so again, while rulemaking process moves at a slow pace, and it should, to make sure it's deliberate and thoughtful, employers should remain informed about what are some anticipated and participate in this. This is your chance to put in your comments, your experiences, something you see that makes no sense to you or little sense, or you can contribute that may benefit everyone. So analyzing comments after receives the request for information is something that OSHA does, and this is oftentimes how regulations are revised or evolve. So take a look here, and if you do see one that applies to you, and we're going to see cranes, forklifts, confined spaces, drug testing, any of these things, take a look, keep up on that, and help make it better by providing your input. OSHA plans to issue a proposed rule in May that would amend parts of the crane and derricks construction standards, subpart CC. The purpose here is to take a look at correcting references to power line voltage for direct current as well as alternating current, broadening exclusions for forklifts carrying loads under the forks from a winch or hook to a winch or boom, clarifying exclusion for work activities by articulating cranes. Again, this is done in response to comments from industry, trade associations, people like you. So again, feel free, get in there, be a part of this, and you can help make things better for you and our industry. So we alluded to earlier, the powered industrial trucks includes proposed rule updates, the power industrial truck standard to incorporate consensus standards having to do with design and construction of power industrial trucks. Last November, OSHA started reviewing comments on changes to the current standard, which currently relies on the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI standards that date back to 1969. For example, the current standard only covers 11 types of trucks, but now there are 19. So again, this is something you'll see to address these new technologies and to update. There are other potential rulemaking revisions under looking, and you'll include communication tower safety, welding and construction confined spaces, as well as occupational exposure to beryllium and beryllium compounds, both in construction, the shipyard standards, and updates to the hazard communication standards. So these are things that are in the works. Again, something if it applies to you, this is something you can comment on. In November of last year, OSHA said it plans to propose rulemaking regarding post-incident drug testing and safety incentive programs, and also looking at proposed rule for personal protective equipment in the construction industry. So again, these are things that occur. You can take a look and see if that applies to you, and we'll give additional information. The whole idea of these proposed rules, revisions, and topics of interest to OSHA, they are not final. It takes a long time for a final rule to be issued, and it should be. So it really does make OSHA final rule a pretty big deal. It really does, because this may apply to some of you, none of you, or all of you. So again, if you're a part of this, you can help make it the way better. Again, as the Three Bears story said, right? Not too hot, not too cold, but make sure it's just right. So there's a lot of resources for success that Lancaster has. Feel free to review the client portal for plenty of safety related resources. Here's one that's a good one. It's an OSHA starter guide checklist. And I will turn this back and thank you for your time and attention today.
Thanks so much, Dean. So, yeah, as he mentioned, if you just go ahead and check out the handouts tab on your go-to webinar control panel, the first checklist that we have is the OSHA Starter Guide checklist. And then the second one we have is the OSHA training topics. So, what's required and how often you should be training your employees. And then we can also see the following slide regarding the 2020 OSHA changes. So Dean, thank you so much for everything today. All of that was great information. If you guys enjoyed this webinar, make sure you check out our podcast, social media pages, and also get on our webinar alerts list. Everything's accessible from our website. If you have any questions, please feel free to call us anytime at 888-403-6026. Thank you guys so much and have a safe day.